everyone. This is Mac again from Simcoe County for Palestine. This is a second video in the Invest in People Not War update series. And this one is all about development charges. I'm talking about development charges because this is one of the financial incentives that Nuttall announced he would give to weapons companies for coming to Barrie. Barrie City Council on June 17th voted into effect bylaw 077, which accepted the Employment Development Community Improvement Plan as amended in June of 2026. And one of those amendments was the Sovereign Investment Readiness Program, which introduced a suite of development charge discounts to weapons companies who might come to Barrie. So I want to explain what development charges are and to understand how they're used by municipalities in order to spur investment, as they are in this case. The most common way that development charge discounts are used by municipalities is to create affordable housing, and this is also the case in Barrie. So I'm going to talk about the affordable housing development charge discount program that the city of Barrie has started. I hope to have a second video about development charge discounts by municipalities and how that is used to attract industry to cities. Development charges are fees that are charged by municipalities to developers, and the purpose is to recoup costs that municipalities would otherwise have to take to service the new development. So if a new apartment building is going in, there's the cost of building the apartment, which the developer pays, but there are also effects that will have on the city. So it might increase traffic in that area. So the city has to study those impacts and make adaptations. They might have to widen roads, put in bike lanes, put in traffic lights, and that all costs money. So in order to recoup those costs, cities will charge private developers a fee to pay for the extra expense that the city has to take on. This became formalized in 1989 under the First Development Charges Act in Ontario, and then in 1997 a revised Development Charges Act was created, which reduced the scope of services that could be funded through these development charges. You'd think that most municipal governments would be in favor of development charges because it's increasing their dollars that they can use, or it's recovering some costs that they would otherwise have to pay. But in the neoliberal era that we are currently living in, there are politicians who exist to give away public resources to the private sector so that financial elites can charge people rent for using those resources which were previously public. This is Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, and Brian Mulroney, who are three heads of state who helped to usher in the neoliberal era in the 1980s. And this trend continues today with our mayor. There's a fierce debate over development charges, and as you would expect, developers are against them. They say that they increase the price of housing and that consumers have to pay for that increased price, and they therefore argue against them. They argue that if there were less development charges, they would be able to build more houses, and then that would bring down the cost of housing. So this is a typical supply side argument, which is always made by developers. They basically say that the cause of housing unaffordability is that there are not enough houses. And they argue that the government should make it easier for them to build homes and apartment buildings and houses, and that will increase the supply. We'll move up here, which will decrease the demand, and then the supply curve will have to shift to the right because and that will produce a new lower price for housing. This is an excellent book which anyone who's interested in housing should read. It's about 100 pages. I do have an extra copy if someone would like to borrow it. Just send us a message to Simcoe County for Palestine, or you can comment on this video. The The author deals with what he calls the supply side argument in this book. And basically what he says is housing supply is important, but it is not the only factor that is producing housing unaffordability. And the reason for this is that, as he puts it, housing is not bananas. So normally with commodities, when the person who has the commodity, the person who has the bananas, is not selling them, they are very motivated to sell them because bananas are going to spoil and it costs money to store them. So they are pretty motivated to reduce the price when the bananas aren't selling at the original price. But housing is not like that because land is relatively scarce and it tends to increase in value over time. So even if the apartment is sitting empty and not being rented out, the landlord is still, or the owner of the property is still making money, just less money than they would be if the place was being rented. And the same is true when developers buy a piece of property and they just sit on it and sit on it and sit on it, and they just wait for the value of the property to go up, which tends to happen over time. So land, the same supply and demand argument can't be just stuck right onto the housing issue because the owner of the property or the owner of the housing is not as motivated to lower the price as they are for other commodities. This is our proof in Barrie. I took this information from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and this is the vacancy rates in Barrie from 2022 to 2025. And as you can see, the vacancy rate has more than doubled. In October of 2022, it was 2.1, then it was 2.6, 3.4, and up to 4.3 last year. And this indicates that there are more apartments sitting empty. And you'd think that if there are more apartments sitting empty, the landlords would be motivated to reduce the rent. If we were using a supply and demand model to explain rental prices, we should be seeing rent coming down. But in fact, rent is also going up. And so in 2022, it was $14.41. Now we're up to $16.90, even though vacancy rates have gone up over the same time. So this is our proof that it's not sufficient to increase housing supply or increase the demand for housing and expect rents to come down. And the reason for this is simple. It's because landlords and developers will hoard on wealth, and they don't adjust their prices based on demand. They just go by what the market will bear. And if it sits empty, so be it. They're still making money. This point is made by the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and they talk about development charges in Ontario. They say that if development charges are cut, home building costs are reduced, but there is no guarantee that new homes will cost less. Prices are set by developers depending on their profitability targets and what the market is willing to bear. Okay, so let's talk about the development charge discount programs under Barrie City Council. The development charge, so in October of 2024, the Housing Community Improvement Plan had development discharged in it for fourplexes and high density buildings, and there was no affordability requirement attached to these discounts. In May of 2025, Nuttall issued a strong mayor directive to create the development charge deferral program. This introduced a 20% affordability requirement. And in August of 2025, there was a bylaw passed by City Council to implement this program. In October, the program was extended and $80 million was allotted to give away development charge discounts. And then in June, the program was considered to be a success. They announced that 36 of that $80 million had been used to create affordable housing. This was a newsletter I got in my mailbox in April, and clearly we are good. Affordable housing is here. Here are all the programs that are coming, all the units that are coming as a result of the development charge waiver program. Here is Nuttall announcing a new development which had affordable housing in it. And the comments I thought were spot on. If these affordable homes are over $1,400 per month, they are not affordable. Define affordable. What do you consider affordable? Shouldn't all housing be affordable? What a joke. What do you consider affordable? Define affordable. So this is the definition that the city is using. It's not that easy to find, although it is in some of the updates on this program. The best place to find these numbers is to go to the Ontario website. If you just Google this and go to, there's a link on this website, and you can download an Excel spreadsheet which has the costs or the rents per month. So it's different for every month, and they change it based on incomes, I think. But these are the numbers for June of 2026. So this is what developers will be needing to sign on to, having 20% of their units be these rental prices for 25 years, or being affordable for 25 years, which right now are these rental prices, and that will change according to the provincial government's definition. So the just for reference, ODSP gets you $1,436 as a max per month, and OW gets you $733 per month. So you could not afford these apartments on social assistance. This is an update in June on the development charge waiver pilot program, and they found that 8 projects had entered into the agreements with the city, committed to 20% of their units being affordable for 25 years, and they had started building by the end of May 2026, and therefore they were receiving these discounts. The total was $36 million given out to these developers for 224 affordable units. That's a cost of $158,595 per affordable unit. And this cost just covers, this is not the total cost of the units, it's the cost of the development charges, so which cover transportation, stormwater, wastewater, maintenance of nearby parkland, and natural features. The Rose Street development, for contrast, was 161 million for 220 units, and the cost is $735,000 per unit. So that's quite a bit higher than the $160,000 per unit, but that is the total cost. So that includes those things that would, the infrastructure costs that would come under the development charges, but that also includes the construction cost. So it's not really a fair comparison to look at this price per unit on Rose Street and compare it to the development charge payouts. But even still, there's this Rose Street development also hopefully will actually be affordable, unlike the private developments. Now, what is the result of this program on the city finances? And I mentioned this article in my last video. This is by Brett Glover in June, and he is reporting on a year-end report from city staff about the budget, and they found that there was a deficit was reported for 1.35 million, and in large part this was due to the 5.4 million that the city paid out in development charge discounts in 2025. This dipped into our piggy bank significantly. This is the year-end report, which was presented to Barrie City Council, and these are the tax reserves, or the tax rates, where all this is paid out of. So the tax rate, this is how much money is coming in through property taxes, and the wastewater and water rates, this is how much money is coming in from those, or that's sort of the balance, I guess, at the end of the year in 2025. And this is what's supposed to be in the piggy bank. So you have 6.6 million for the tax rate, and in the piggy bank we're supposed to have between 20 and 39 million. For the wastewater rate, we have 2.5 million, and we're supposed to have between 2.3 and 4.7 million. And for the for the water rate, we have 4.1 million, and we're supposed to have between 1.8 and 3.7 million. So we're okay for wastewater and water, but the tax rate, we are significantly below the balance that's supposed to be in there. And that's because of these development charge discounts that were paid out. So take-home points: development charges are fees charged by municipalities to private developers to recoup costs. Developers argue that development charges reduce housing supply and raise housing costs. Barrie has given away 5.4 million in development charge discounts for 2025 and plans to give away a lot more in 2026. So far, we're at 36 million. This so far has not produced affordable housing, and we shouldn't expect it to, because supply is not the only issue that affects housing prices, and it doesn't address the exploitative relationship between landlords and tenants. But this program has dipped deep into our piggy bank and caused a 1.35 million deficit for 2025. So that's it for housing and development charges. I hope to have a future video on development charges and industry.